I woke up on a Tuesday morning in December to the sound of construction equipment rumbling onto my property in rural Montana, just outside of Billings, and my first thought was that someone had made a very expensive mistake. My name is Blake Emerson, and I own a 40-acre plot of land with a modest house, a workshop, and a barn that my grandfather built in 1962. The barn is massive, solid, and mostly empty except for some old farm equipment and storage. I work remotely as a software engineer, which is why I moved out here 3 years ago from Seattle. The peace and quiet were exactly what I needed, but peace and quiet were not what I was getting that morning. I threw on jeans and a flannel shirt, shoved my feet into boots, and headed outside. The temperature was hovering around 15 degrees, and my breath came out in white clouds. 3 trucks were parked near my barn, and a group of about 6 people were unloading what looked like building materials, space heaters, and furniture. I jogged over, my boots crunching on the frozen ground. "Hey, what the hell is going on here?" A middle-aged woman with short blonde hair and a bright purple jacket turned to face me. She had that particular expression I had come to recognize over my 3 years dealing with the Pleasant Valley Homeowners Association, the kind that said she knew better than you about everything. "Oh, good morning," she said cheerfully. "You must be Mr. Emerson." "I'm Brenda Patterson, the new HOA president. We're just setting up the community warming station." I stared at her. "The what?" "The warming station. It was approved at last month's HOA meeting. Since we've had such harsh winters, the board decided we needed a centralized location where community members could go if they lost power or heat. Your barn is the perfect location." "My barn," I said slowly, "is on my private property." Brenda waved a hand dismissively. "Well, yes, but according to the HOA bylaws, all properties within the Pleasant Valley boundaries can be utilized for community purposes in emergency situations. This qualifies." I pulled out my phone. "I want to see that in writing, right now, and I want to know why nobody asked my permission." "We sent out an email notification," Brenda said, her smile tightening slightly. "I didn't get any email." "Well, that's not our fault if you don't check your email regularly. The vote was unanimous among those who attended the meeting." I looked past her at the barn. They had already opened the large sliding doors and were carrying in expensive-looking space heaters, folding cots, blankets, a coffee maker, and what appeared to be a small generator. "Stop," I said loudly. "Everyone stop right now. You're trespassing." One of the men, wearing a thick winter coat and work gloves, paused with a space heater in his hands. "Brenda." "What do we do?" Brenda's smile had completely vanished now. "Mr. Emerson, don't make this difficult. This is for the good of the community. Surely you're not so selfish that you would deny your neighbors a safe place during a crisis." "I'm not denying anyone anything," I said. "But you can't just use my property without asking. That's not how property rights work." "The HOA bylaws supersede individual preferences in matters of community safety," Brenda said, pulling out her phone. She scrolled for a moment, then turned it to show me. "Section 17, subsection 4. See?" I took her phone and read the section. It was vaguely worded, something about community resources and shared responsibilities, but nothing that explicitly said the HOA could commandeer someone's private barn. "This doesn't say what you think it says," I told her. "Our lawyer disagrees." "Look, Mr. Emerson, we're trying to be good neighbors here. The warming station will only be activated in genuine emergencies. It won't interfere with your daily life. You're in my barn right now, putting stuff in it without my permission. That's pretty much the definition of interfering with my daily life." Brenda's face was turning red, either from the cold or from anger. "Fine. If you want to be difficult about this, We'll add it to the agenda for next month's meeting and have a formal discussion." "Great," I said. "Until then, please remove everything from my barn and leave my property." She glared at me, then turned to the others. "Leave everything where it is. Let's go." "Excuse me," I said. "I just told you to remove it. And I'm telling you that moving all this equipment twice would be a waste of time and resources. We'll settle this at the meeting, and then we won't have to move it at all. Brenda, if this stuff isn't gone by the end of the day, I'm going to consider it abandoned property." She actually laughed at that. "You wouldn't dare. That equipment is worth thousands of dollars. It's HOA property." "Then the HOA should take better care of its property and not leave it on other people's land." We stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Brenda said, "We'll see what our lawyer has to say about this," and marched back to her car. The others followed, shooting me uncertain looks. I watched them drive away, then walked into my barn to survey the damage. They had been busy in the short time before I came out. In the southwest corner of the barn, they had set up a little area with 6 folding cots, each with a pillow and 2 heavy blankets. There were 4 industrial space heaters, the expensive kind that probably cost $300 each. A card table held a large coffee maker, boxes of coffee pods, stacks of disposable cups, napkins, and various condiments. There was a portable generator, still in its packaging, that looked like it could power a small house. Boxes of emergency supplies were stacked nearby, stuff like first aid kits, flashlights, batteries, and bottled water. I estimated the total value at somewhere between $5,000 and $8,000, maybe more. Part of me felt bad. They clearly had good intentions, even if their execution was completely wrong. But I couldn't let the HOA think they could just use my property however they wanted. That was a precedent I wasn't willing to set. I pulled out my phone and called my friend Derek, who was a real estate attorney in Billings. "Blake, how's rural life treating you?" Derek answered cheerfully. "I've got an HOA problem," I said, and explained the situation. Derek whistled. "Yeah, that's not legal. They can't use your property without your permission, HOA bylaws or not. Those bylaws are essentially a contract between property owners, but they don't supersede actual property law." That's what I thought. So what do I do? Send a formal written notice to the HOA demanding removal of all items from your property within 72 hours. Send it certified mail so they can't claim they didn't receive it. If they don't comply, the property becomes abandoned and you can do whatever you want with it. Really? Well, legally it's a bit more complicated, but yes, essentially. They're trespassing and leaving property on your land without permission. After a reasonable time period, which 72 hours definitely is, you have rights to dispose of or keep that property. You might want to send them a bill for storage fees too. I grinned. Derek, you're a genius. I'm a lawyer. It's different. But seriously, document everything. Take photos, save all communications, keep records. If this goes south, you'll want evidence. I spent the next hour photographing every item in the barn from multiple angles, making a detailed inventory, and writing up my formal notice. I printed it out, drove into Billings, and sent it certified mail from the post office. Then I stopped by the hardware store and bought a new lock for the barn, a heavy-duty padlock that would require bolt cutters to get through. When I got home, I installed the lock and secured the barn. My phone rang almost immediately. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. "Mr. Emerson, this is Patricia Winters. I'm the legal counsel for the Pleasant Valley HOA. "Hello," I said neutrally. "I understand there's been some confusion regarding the community warming station. Mrs. Patterson asked me to give you a call to clear things up." "There's no confusion. The HOA put property on my land without permission, and I've sent a formal notice demanding its removal within 72 hours. Mr. Emerson, I'm sure we can resolve this amicably. The warming station serves a vital community need. Then put it on HOA common property or on the property of someone who actually agrees to it. The central location of your barn makes it ideal for serving all community members. Surely you can see the benefit of Miss Winters. Let me be clear. I don't care if my barn is located in the exact geographic center of Pleasant Valley. It's my property. The HOA does not have permission to use it. Remove your items within 72 hours or I'll consider them abandoned. There was a pause. Mr. Emerson, I should warn you that retaining HOA property could be considered theft, and placing property on someone's land without permission could be considered trespassing and illegal dumping. I guess we both have lawyers who can argue about it if needed. Another pause. I'll convey your position to the board. She hung up. I felt a little bad about being so hardline, but this was the principle of the thing. If I gave in on this, what would they try next? HOAs were notorious for overstepping boundaries, and I had heard horror stories from friends in other states about paint colors, lawn heights, and parking restrictions that turned into legal nightmares. The next morning, I woke up to find a group of about 20 people standing at the end of my driveway, holding signs. I drove down in my truck to see what was going on. The signs said things like "community over selfishness," "Blake Emerson doesn't care about neighbors," and "warming stations save lives." Brenda Patterson was front and center, and when she saw me, she started a chant. "Community first, community first." I rolled down my window. "Really? You're protesting on my property now? This is community property," Brenda said. "The first 50 feet of every driveway in Pleasant Valley is considered shared space for community gatherings according to the bylaws." "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." "It's in the bylaws that you agreed to when you purchased your property." I thought about getting out and arguing, but decided it wasn't worth it. Instead, I just drove through slowly and they parted to let me pass, still chanting. I had to drive into Billings for a meeting with a client that couldn't be done remotely, and by the time I got back that afternoon, the protesters were gone. But there was a notice stuck to my front door. It was an official HOA violation notice, citing me for failure to maintain community standards and obstruction of community safety measures. I was being fined $500. I took a photo of it and texted it to Derek. "Can they do this?" I typed. "They can issue it, but it's not enforceable. Don't pay it. Keep it as evidence of their harassment," he replied. The 72 hours passed. The HOA didn't remove anything from my barn. On the morning of the 4th day, I documented everything again with fresh photos and videos, showing that nothing had been moved. Then I called Derek. "Congratulations," he said. "You're now the proud owner of several $1,000s worth of HOA equipment. What do I do with it?" "Whatever you want. Sell it, keep it, donate it. It's legally yours now. They abandoned it on your property after being given formal notice to remove it. They're going to lose their minds, probably. Which is why I'm going to draft a formal letter explaining the legal situation, just so everything is documented. Expect them to threaten legal action, but they don't have a leg to stand on." I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and anxiety. Part of me wanted to just give the stuff back to avoid the drama, but the other part was tired of being pushed around by an HOA that seemed to think rules applied to everyone except them. That evening, Brenda showed up at my door. She had a man with her, tall and thin with gray hair, wearing an expensive-looking suit. "Mr. Emerson, I'm Robert Blackwell, president of the Pleasant Valley HOA Board of Directors. I noted that Brenda had apparently been wrong about being president herself. I thought Brenda was the president. Mrs. Patterson is the vice president and community outreach coordinator. May we come in and discuss this situation like reasonable adults? I considered it. We can talk on the porch. It was cold out, only about 20 degrees, but I wasn't letting them into my house. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Mr. Emerson, Robert began, I think there's been a series of unfortunate miscommunications here. The only miscommunication was the HOA thinking they could use my property without asking. That's fair, Robert said, which surprised me. Brenda looked surprised too. Mrs. Patterson was overly enthusiastic in implementing the warming station initiative. However, the equipment in your barn is valuable HOA property, purchased with dues from all community members. Keeping it would be inappropriate. I sent a formal notice demanding its removal. That notice was ignored. As far as I'm concerned, the property was abandoned. Come on now, Robert said, his reasonable tone slipping slightly. You know that's not how this works. That's exactly how it works, according to my attorney. Robert's jaw tightened. Mr. Emerson, don't make this a legal battle. Legal battles are expensive and time-consuming for everyone. Then you should have followed the law in the first place. Brenda couldn't contain herself anymore. This is ridiculous. You're being a child. That equipment is for helping people in need. Then maybe you should have put it somewhere legal, I said. We have rights to use community spaces. Brenda insisted. My barn is not a community space. Robert put a hand on Brenda's arm, trying to calm her down. Mr. Emerson, what would it take for you to return the equipment? I thought about it. A formal written apology from the HOA admitting they were wrong, withdrawal of the fine, and a guarantee in writing that the HOA will never attempt to use my property for any purpose without my explicit written permission. That's outrageous, Brenda said. Is it? I asked. You trespassed. You left property on my land without permission. You tried to bully me into accepting it. You organized a protest at my home, and you fined me for not going along with your illegal activity. I think I'm being pretty reasonable. Robert was quiet for a moment. I'll bring it to the board. They left, and I went back inside, my hands shaking slightly. Confrontation wasn't my favorite thing, but I felt like I was standing up for something important. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I kept expecting something to happen, but there were no more visits, no more protests, no more phone calls. Then, a week later, I came home from grocery shopping to find the lock on my barn had been cut off, and all the equipment was gone. I immediately called the sheriff's office in Yellowstone County. A deputy named Martinez arrived about 40 minutes later, a serious-looking woman in her 30s. Mr. Emerson, you reported a theft. I showed her the cut lock, the photos of the equipment that had been in the barn, and the documentation of everything that had happened. She took notes, looked around the barn, and photographed the cut lock. This is an interesting situation, she said. Do you know who took the items? I'm certain it was the HOA. They're the ones who put it there in the first place. But you don't have proof they came back and took it. No, but who else would want space heaters and cots with Pleasant Valley HOA labeled on them? She nodded. I'll need to file a report. The issue is whether this is theft or retrieval of abandoned property. Both sides could argue their position. I have documentation that I legally obtained ownership of the property after they abandoned it, I said, showing her Derek's letter. Deputy Martinez read it carefully. I'm not a lawyer, and I can't give legal advice, but this does seem to support your position. The problem is, if the HOA claims they were just retrieving their own property, it becomes a civil matter rather than a criminal one. So they can just break my lock and take whatever they want. They shouldn't have broken the lock. That's clearly property damage. I can file a report for that and for the theft of the items, but I have to be honest with you, the DA might not want to prosecute this. It's complicated. I felt frustration building. So they get away with it. You can pursue it civilly. Sue for the value of the items plus damages for the lock and your time. You'll probably win based on this documentation. After she left, I called Derek and explained what happened. File a police report for the theft and property damage, which you did good. Then we sue them in civil court for the value of the property, replacement of the lock, and your time and distress. I'd estimate you can get somewhere around $8,000 to $10,000 if we pursue it aggressively. I don't care about the money. I care about them thinking they can do whatever they want. Then we'll make sure they don't think that anymore. Let me draft a lawsuit. This is going to be fun. The lawsuit was filed 3 days later. I was suing the Pleasant Valley HOA for trespassing, property damage, theft, and harassment, seeking $10,000 in damages plus attorney fees. My phone rang constantly for the next 2 days. I didn't answer most of the calls, but I did get a lot of angry voicemails. Most were from HOA board members or other residents accusing me of wasting everyone's time and money. A few were supportive, saying the HOA had been overstepping for years, and they were glad someone was finally standing up to them. One voicemail was from a woman named Angela Ortega, who said she was a reporter for the Billings Gazette and wanted to hear my side of the story. I called her back. "Mr. Emerson, thanks for getting back to me. I've been covering local government issues, and your lawsuit against the Pleasant Valley HOA caught my attention. Can you tell me what happened?" I gave her the whole story, from finding them in my barn to the cut lock and missing equipment. She asked good questions and seemed genuinely interested. "This is fascinating," she said. "I've done several pieces on HOA overreach in Montana. It's becoming a bigger issue as more developments add HOA requirements. Would you be willing to go on the record with all of this?" "Sure. I've got nothing to hide." "Great. Can I come out tomorrow and get some photos of your property and the barn? Maybe get a formal interview?" Angela showed up the next morning with a photographer. She was in her late 20s, energetic and professional. The photographer, a quiet guy named Marcus, took pictures of the barn, the cut lock, and me standing in front of my property. The interview took about an hour. Angela asked about everything, the timeline of events, my communication with the HOA, the legal arguments, and how I felt about the situation. "Honestly," I told her, "I would have been happy to help in a real emergency. If someone's power went out in a blizzard and they needed a warm place, my door would be open. But that's not what this was about. This was about the HOA deciding they could use private property without consent. That's not okay, no matter how good their intentions were." The article came out 3 days later, and it was front-page news in the local section. The headline read, "Rural Property Owner Battles HOA Over Unauthorized Warming Station in Private Barn." The article was balanced, presenting both sides. Angela had gotten quotes from Robert and Brenda defending their position, but she had also included the legal perspective from Derek and quotes from other Pleasant Valley residents who supported me. The comments section online was heated, with people arguing passionately on both sides. The publicity changed everything. Suddenly, this wasn't just a dispute between me and the HOA. It was a community issue, a property rights issue, and a story that resonated with people who had their own HOA horror stories. I started getting emails and messages from people all over Montana, and even from other states, sharing their experiences with overreaching HOAs. Some were funny, some were infuriating, and some were just sad. The common thread was a feeling of powerlessness against organizations that were supposed to serve the community, but often seemed more interested in control. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for a Thursday evening. Normally, these meetings had maybe 15 people show up. According to Angela, who attended to cover it for the paper, over 80 people came. She called me after the meeting. "Blake, that was intense. The board tried to defend their actions, but they got hammered with questions. A lot of residents are angry that their dues went to buy equipment that's now the subject of a lawsuit. Others are angry that the board acted without proper authorization. There was even a motion to recall the entire board, but it didn't pass. Too complicated, apparently." What about the warming station? Dead in the water. They voted to abandon the project entirely, too controversial now. I felt a strange sense of victory mixed with exhaustion. This had consumed so much time and energy, and for what? Some space heaters and cots that I never wanted in the first place. But then Derek called with news that made it all feel more worthwhile. "Blake, their attorney just called me. The HOA wants to settle. They'll pay for the lock, formally apologize, withdraw the fine, and guarantee in writing that they'll never use your property without permission. They'll also pay your attorney fees." What about the equipment I claimed? Here's where it gets interesting. They want the equipment back, but they're willing to pay you fair market value for the time you stored it on your property. I negotiated $8,000. Basically, they're acknowledging that you had legal claim to it and they're buying it back from you. $8,000. Yep. And a formal apology that will be read at the next HOA meeting and included in the community newsletter. Plus all your legal fees, which are about $3,000 so far. You're coming out ahead here, and more importantly, you're making it clear that property rights matter. I agreed to the settlement. It wasn't about the money, though I certainly wouldn't turn it down. It was about the principle, and the HOA was finally acknowledging they'd been wrong. The formal apology came 2 weeks later. Derek received a certified letter with the settlement check and a written apology. The apology read, "The Pleasant Valley Homeowners Association acknowledges that we acted inappropriately by placing equipment on Mr. Blake Emerson's private property without his explicit permission. We further acknowledge that our subsequent actions, including issuing a violation fine and retrieving the equipment without authorization, were wrong. We apologize to Mr. Emerson and to the community for this situation. Going forward, the HOA board will ensure that all actions are properly vetted through legal counsel and that property owners' rights are respected." It was signed by all 5 board members. Angela ran a follow-up article with the headline, "HOA settles property dispute, issues formal apology." The article detailed the settlement terms and included quotes from me about hoping this would set a precedent for respecting property rights in the community. I thought that would be the end of it. The settlement was reached, the apology issued, and everything seemed resolved. I could go back to my quiet life, working remotely and enjoying my 40 acres of peace. But 3 weeks after the settlement, I got a knock on my door early on a Saturday morning. It was Deputy Martinez again, and she had 2 other officers with her. "Mr. Emerson, sorry to bother you so early. We need to ask you some questions about the Pleasant Valley HOA." "Okay," I said, confused. "What's going on?" "There's been an investigation into HOA finances. Your lawsuit raised some red flags, and when the state looked into it, they found some irregularities. Can we come in?" I let them in, completely baffled. Martinez and the other officers, who introduced themselves as Detective Sarah Chen and Detective Marcus Riley, sat down in my living room. "Mr. Emerson," Detective Chen began, "when your lawsuit brought attention to the HOA's spending, including the several $1,000s spent on warming station equipment. The Montana Department of Justice started looking into Pleasant Valley HOA's financial records. What they found was concerning. "What kind of concerning?" I asked. "Embezzlement," Detective Riley said bluntly. "It appears that over the past 3 years, approximately $75,000 in HOA dues have been misappropriated." I stared at them. $75,000. "The investigation is ongoing, but it looks like Brenda Patterson, the vice president, was creating fake invoices for community projects that didn't exist or were vastly overpriced. She was pocketing the difference." The warming station equipment was actually one of the legitimate purchases, ironically. "Holy shit," I said. "We're building a case against Mrs. Patterson for wire fraud, embezzlement, and theft. The reason we're here is to ask if you noticed anything unusual during your interactions with the HOA. Any red flags, unusual behavior, anything that might help our investigation." I thought back. Brenda was definitely aggressive about the warming station, but I thought that was just her personality. She seemed really invested in it. I don't know if that means anything. "It might," Detective Chen said. "We think the warming station was her attempt to do something genuinely good after years of stealing from the community. Maybe she felt guilty, or maybe she was trying to create cover for the missing money by showing community improvements. We're still piecing it together." They asked me more questions about my interactions with Brenda and the other board members, about the financial aspects of the lawsuit, and about anything unusual I had noticed. I told them everything I could remember, though it wasn't much. I had been focused on the property rights issue, not on HOA finances. After they left, I sat in stunned silence. This explained so much. The aggressive push for the warming station, the unwillingness to back down, the desperation in Brenda's voice when she argued with me. She had been trying to prove she was doing good for the community, maybe to herself more than anyone else. The story broke 2 days later. Angela called me first, asking if I had heard about the arrests. Arrests. Plural. Brenda Patterson was arrested this morning for embezzlement. But it gets weirder. Robert Blackwell, the HOA president, was arrested too. Turns out he knew about the embezzlement and helped cover it up in exchange for kickbacks. The scale of the scandal was staggering. As more details emerged over the following weeks, the picture became clearer. Brenda had been systematically stealing from the HOA for 3 years, creating fake landscaping invoices, inflating maintenance costs, and charging for community events that never happened. Robert had discovered it about a year ago and confronted her. Instead of reporting it, he agreed to stay quiet in exchange for monthly payments. Together, they had stolen and misappropriated over $85,000. The warming station had indeed been Brenda's attempt at redemption. According to text messages the police recovered, she had genuinely wanted to help the community, to do something real and good. But her execution had been so aggressive and legally questionable because she was desperate for it to work. She needed a win, something to point to and say, "See, I do care about Pleasant Valley." And I had gotten in the way of that. Part of me felt bad. Maybe if I had been more flexible, more understanding, she would have had her redemption project and this all would have played out differently. But Derek, when I voiced this thought to him over drinks in Billings, shut it down immediately. "Blake, she stole $85,000 from her neighbors. She didn't get caught because you stopped her warming station. She got caught because your lawsuit brought attention to HOA spending, and someone finally looked at the books properly. If anything, you exposed a crime that might have continued for years. But if I had just let her use the barn, she still would have been a thief. She still would have betrayed the trust of everyone in that community. The warming station doesn't erase theft, Don't let guilt twist this around. He was right, of course, but it still felt complicated. The legal process moved forward. Brenda and Robert were both charged with multiple felonies. The HOA's insurance covered some of the financial losses, and the remaining board members worked with a court-appointed financial overseer to straighten out the organization's books. I attended the next HOA meeting, the first one I had gone to in over a year. The atmosphere was somber. About 50 people were there, many of them angry, confused, or both. A new interim president, a retired accountant named Frank Meredith, stood at the front. I know everyone has questions and concerns. The board is committed to complete transparency moving forward. We're conducting a full audit, implementing new financial controls, and making sure this never happens again. People asked questions, voiced frustrations, and shared their shock at the betrayal. When there was a lull, I raised my hand. Frank nodded at me. "Blake, go ahead." "I just want to say I'm sorry for the role my lawsuit played in causing turmoil in the community. That wasn't my intention. I was defending my property rights, but I never wanted any of this." An older woman I recognized as my neighbor, Linda, spoke up. "Blake, don't you dare apologize. You stood up for yourself when the board was overstepping. That's what led to the truth coming out. We should be thanking you." There was a murmur of agreement from several people. Not everyone. Some still blamed me for causing trouble, but enough that I felt less like a pariah. Frank spoke again. "Blake, your lawsuit was entirely justified. The board acted inappropriately, and you had every right to defend your property. The financial crimes we discovered are completely separate from that dispute. You have nothing to apologize for." The meeting continued for another hour, covering budget concerns, upcoming elections for permanent board positions, and plans to recover what they could from Brenda and Robert's assets. Both had to put their homes up for sale as part of restitution agreements. As I was leaving, Angela caught up with me in the parking lot. She had been covering the meeting for another article. "Blake, can I get a comment on how you feel about how this all turned out?" I thought about it. "Honestly, it's bittersweet. I won my lawsuit, I protected my property rights, and I helped expose financial crimes. But a lot of people got hurt. Trust in the community is damaged. People lost money. That's not something to celebrate. Do you regret fighting the HOA over the warming station?" "No. I regret that it escalated the way it did, but I don't regret standing up for my rights. If I had just rolled over and accepted it, I would have set a precedent that the HOA could do whatever they wanted. Sometimes you have to draw a line, even when it's uncomfortable." The article came out the next day. A comprehensive piece about the whole saga from the initial dispute to the criminal charges. It included interviews with community members, legal experts discussing HOA overreach and property rights, and financial experts talking about how HOA embezzlement is more common than people think. The article went viral, at least by Billings Gazette standards. It got picked up by the Associated Press and ran in newspapers across Montana and several other states. I started getting interview requests from local news stations and even a few national outlets that covered property rights issues. I declined most of them. I had made my point, the truth was out, and I just wanted to move on with my life. The criminal trial for Brenda and Robert was scheduled for the following spring. Both ultimately took plea deals. Brenda pled guilty to embezzlement and wire fraud, receiving a sentence of 4 years in prison and restitution of $50,000. Robert pled guilty to conspiracy and received 3 years plus $35,000 in restitution. Neither showed up to any HOA meetings after their arrests, and their houses sold quickly, bought by young families hoping for a peaceful life in rural Montana. The new HOA board, elected in a special election that February, was completely different from the old one. Frank Meredith became the permanent president, and the other board members were all people who had spoken up during the scandal, calling for accountability and transparency. One of their first acts was to formally revise the HOA bylaws to make them clearer and to explicitly state that no private property could be used for community purposes without written consent from the owner. They sent me a copy of the new bylaws with a letter thanking me for my role in improving the community, even though it came about in an unexpected way. Spring came to Montana, and with it, the thaw. My 40 acres became beautiful again, green and peaceful. I worked in my garden, maintained my property, and enjoyed the quiet I had moved out here for in the first place. One afternoon in late April, I was working in my barn, cleaning out some old equipment when I heard a vehicle pull up. I walked out to find a minivan parked in my driveway. A woman in her 30s got out with 3 kids. "Hi," she said nervously. "Are you Blake Emerson?" "That's me. Can I help you?" "I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Rachel Chen. I just moved to Pleasant Valley last month. I read about what happened with the HOA and your lawsuit, and I wanted to thank you." "Thank me. We almost didn't buy here because of the HOA requirements. We've had bad experiences with HOAs before. But after reading about the changes that were made, the new bylaws, the new board, we felt confident that this community was actually committed to doing things right. So, thank you for standing up and making a difference." Her kids were playing near the van, and she called them over. "These are my kids, Emma, Sophie, and Tyler. Say hi to Mr. Emerson." They chorused a polite hello, and I smiled. "Nice to meet you all. Welcome to Pleasant Valley." After they left, I stood there for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. The confrontation, the lawsuit, the scandal, the arrests, the changes. It had been exhausting and stressful, but maybe in the end it had been worth it. The HOA never bothered me again. Dues notices came regularly, and I paid them without complaint. The common areas were maintained. Community events were held, and the HOA functioned the way it was supposed to, as a service organization for the residents rather than an authoritarian body trying to control them. I heard through the grapevine that there were discussions about creating an actual warming station on a piece of HOA common land near the community center. Frank reached out to me to ask if I had any advice, given my experience with the issue. I told him I thought it was a great idea if done properly, with proper planning and community input. He thanked me and said they would keep me updated. Derek and I stayed in touch. He had enjoyed the case so much that he started specializing in property rights disputes, particularly those involving HOAs. He said I had given him a new career focus. "You're my origin story," he joked over drinks one evening. The case that made me realize how much I love fighting overreaching HOAs. Angela won a regional journalism award for her coverage of the Pleasant Valley HOA scandal. She wrote a follow-up piece 6 months after the trial, examining how the community had healed and moved forward. She interviewed me again, and I talked about the importance of standing up for your rights while also being part of a community. "It's a balance," I told her. "You have to be willing to defend your boundaries, but you also have to recognize that we're all living together and trying to make things work. The key is mutual respect." The HOA has to respect property owners, and property owners have to respect the legitimate role of the HOA in maintaining the community. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. I worked, I enjoyed my property, and I participated in community events when they interested me. I even joined the Architectural Review Committee for the HOA, helping review applications for property modifications. It felt like a way to give back and ensure that the review process was fair and reasonable. 2 years after the warming station incident, Pleasant Valley was a different place. The scandal had been painful, but it had forced the community to examine itself and make meaningful changes. Trust had been rebuilt slowly, through consistent transparency and accountability from the new board, and my barn remained my barn, full of my stuff, used for my purposes. Just the way it should be. I never regretted locking that barn and keeping the equipment that day. It had been a stand on principle, a line drawn that needed to be drawn. Sometimes standing up for yourself leads to consequences you never expected, revelations you never sought, and changes you never imagined. But that doesn't mean the stand wasn't worth taking. On a quiet evening in late summer, I sat on my porch watching the sun set over my 40 acres. The sky was brilliant orange and pink, the air was cool and clean, and everything was peaceful. This was why I had moved to Montana, for moments like this, for space and quiet and the freedom to live life on my own terms. The HOA had tried to take a piece of that freedom, probably with good intentions but wrong methods. I had fought back, and in fighting back, I had accidentally exposed corruption and helped create real change in my community. It wasn't the story I expected to tell when I moved to rural Montana to work remotely and enjoy the peace. But it was the story I got, and I was okay with that. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from the Pleasant Valley HOA, a newsletter announcing the completion of the new community warming station on HOA property. It included photos of the facility, a converted storage building that had been insulated, equipped with heating, stocked with emergency supplies, and staffed by volunteers. The newsletter thanked everyone who had contributed time and money to make it happen and reminded everyone that it was there if they ever needed it. I smiled. They had done it right this time. Community property, community decision, proper planning, and full transparency. The warming station existed, helping the community, just not in my barn. Everything had worked out the way it should eventually, with some bumps and detours along the way. I went back to watching the sunset, content with my choices, my property, and my peaceful life in Montana. The barn stood solid and strong behind my house, just as my grandfather had built it decades ago, full of my tools and my memories, exactly as it should be.